Delaware in the building. Y'all ain't ready for the Delaware takeover. Y'all not ready for this unique style and creativity that everybody in the world wants to see. Naj and Jay is bringing it, and everything they bring got that Delaware swag.
Hey everybody, this is Jay with Naj and Jay, and as you can see, Naj isn't here today, unfortunately, but she is under the weather. But we have someone that we're very interested in having an in-depth conversation with. So we said that the show had to go on no matter what, and quite frankly, from my end, I am happy to sit and have a one-on-one conversation, about politics in this season. So if you don't know this guy, you're going to get to know him very well right now. We have gubernatorial candidate Collin O'Mara.
Hey everybody.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. You know what I mean? It's an honor. So I guess the first basic question is, why don't you just kind of let the people know who you are and what you're about?
Sure. So I actually grew up not in Delaware. I grew up out of state in upstate New York in Syracuse. So it's cold as it gets. I come from a family of teachers and folks that served in the military. Very middle class. And I've been fortunate to have a lot of education opportunities all over the place. But my Delaware story starts in 2009 when Governor Markell asked me to come in and lead the Department of Natural Resources. And the big focus then was shutting down a lot of the coal plants that were poisoning kids and families all across the state and getting at some of the cancer clusters. And again, we still got a ton of work to do there. But I kind of fell in love with the state, and so ended up raising our kids here, and I have 3 amazing young daughters. I currently run an organization called the National Wildlife Federation that does a lot of work in environmental justice and climate. We've done work all across the state and all across the country. But I really decided to get in because there's no one talking about kids. No one really talking about all the places that we're maybe not performing nearly where we need to, given our democratic control.
Yeah. So that's the main thing that my dad has fought for, and if you didn't know, and I don't expect you to know that, but that's why I really appreciate that being your concern. First off, just what made you fall in love with Delaware?
So it's kind of a funny story. So when I was brought in, right? So I was 29 years old. It's this crazy idea, to run a state agency that young and all that. Yeah. And I was working for the mayor of San Jose, California, in Silicon Valley. So kind of as far from Delaware as you can get geographically. Yeah. And it was a combination of amazing parks and just amazing people, folks that actually liked each other. It wasn't like in some other regions of the country you get the fake politeness, or you just get indifference. Yeah, there's actually a sense of community.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that it was real, right?
Okay.
And then also the problems were a scale that if you had the right leadership, you could actually fix stuff. I feel in so many places, the population's so big, right? It's hard to make any kind of change. We're here, for better or for worse, you get the right people in the room, you can make anything happen. If you get the wrong people in the room, you can kill stuff forever, right?
Absolutely.
And so it was that combination. But we live we lived in the city for a long time, and I would live over by Lum's Pond. Yeah. And it's just it's nice to not be inside the Beltway.
Absolutely.
I'm not really a city guy. I'm more of a obviously an environmental guy. I like being on the water and the beaches and stuff. And so it was that combination.
Yeah. Well, so what was your role with all the environmental stuff, and how'd you get into that, and what did that entail? You know what I mean? Is that just something that's near and dear to your heart?
Well, so it's funny. So growing up in upstate New York in Syracuse, we had the most polluted lake in the country.
Oh wow!
So,
really?
Yeah. And so it's sort of one of the Finger Lakes. It's called Onondaga Lake.
Okay.
And for 100 years, the steel mill, a bunch of the chemical plants, a bunch of the other industrial facilities, all just poured sludge into the waterway.
Yeah.
At one point, it was almost as polluted as some of the lakes near Chernobyl, where they the nuclear reactor explosion. And so one of my first works, and it's funny, we didn't call it environmental justice at the time, but it was cleaning up the lake. And the problem is that they were trying to figure out solutions to have reduced the amount of sewage going into the lake in addition to all this, because they were cleaning up the chemicals, and now they also were spilling sewage directly into it. Yeah. And there was a proposal to put a bunch of wastewater treatment facilities in some of the lowest income neighborhoods in the county. Mm-hmm. And so I got involved, and then I started working for the local mayor, who was fighting against the county executive, who didn't want them in the neighborhoods, right? It's a huge environmental injustice. And so watching the community rally, watching the churches rally, watching everyone, and then we won the fight. So we actually were able to basically we don't need these facilities in these neighborhoods. We can put them other places, or we can have the green infrastructure. And that's when I was just kind of oh, there's a people power piece. There's a science piece.
How old are you at this point?
At this point, I'm 22.
Oh, this is super impressionable time. Okay, gotcha.
So it's right after college. And so after all my buddies went to Wall Street and all this nonsense, but I went home. My grandfather was ill, and just it was just one of those moments, right, where I was just like, this is what I should be doing.
Okay.
And so I ended up going back to grad school more for to kind of learn more about environmental economics and kind of economic redevelopment and kind of community redevelopment. But yeah, it's just like one of those fights. And now, I mean, the lake, you can actually fish in it now. I wouldn't necessarily eat everything in it, but like, I mean, we're kind of getting to this point. But the communities, they were able to do some gentrification without displacement. So like, you know, so folks have, you know, higher quality housing. None of that would have been possible if it was just a series of like, you know, wastewater treatment facilities. So that was kind of my intro and kind of my hook.
Yeah, and that's at a really young age. So you get here and you're still more or less working in that capacity. You know what I mean? What were some of the things that you saw here that like drew your immediate attention and needed to be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the first things I did was the Secretary of DENREC serves on something called the Cancer Consortium.
Okay.
And this is actually where I got to know Bethany. There's incredible data in the state for like where folks are sick. And if you overlay that map on where there's either power plants or there's some of the chemical plants, it's like a 1-to-1 comparison.
Wow.
And it's funny because like because Delaware is such a corporate state, because we have so many folks that so many special interests, so many lobbyists, like you're not allowed to say that, right? But I mean, if you look at like Millsboro, for example, there was a massive cancer cluster right around the coal plant.
Yes.
And so I pulled my team together, and they'd already been working on some of this, but I said, what's every tool we have to clean up the coal plant? And so we finished up some mercury regs. We finished up some other, you know, kind of environmental controls around oxides, nitrogen, and sulfur dioxide. Sorry to get so technical.
And I'm trying to actually avoid, like, I want to go technical, but I know that they're like, I don't know, wait, but yeah.
But basically, so we put these regs in place, and the company was like, oh wait, like we're just going to shut down, and we'll switch to, you know, at the time the goal was offshore wind.
Okay.
But all of a sudden, so now you had one of the 10 dirtiest power plants in the country. Now 3 of the 4 units down there are shut down. The other unit, we required $300 million of controls. There's almost no pollution from that plant right now. And in terms of the stack, there's still, you know, there's still some coal ash that we have to deal with. But cancer rates began to go down. Like folks got healthier, right?
It's
so
that
it's like,
blatant.
yeah. And so, you know, so we switched the coal plant on Hay Road to gas. All of a sudden that, you know, made some of the folks on the 495 side and breathe a little easier.
Yeah.
We cleaned up, we shut down a handful of like the most polluting sites in different places.
Right.
And again, it doesn't get a lot of attention, but over those, you know, 5 years.
Do you think that's on purpose, that it doesn't get a lot of attention? I mean, I hate to bring that up but it's like, okay, cool.
We've zoned sacrifice zones, right?
Right.
And so like there's just places and like in some places like communities were there and then the plants were put in place. Other places the facilities were first and then folks moved. But either way, like, you know, we shouldn't have one of the highest rates of cancer. And this is why I'm so like, you know, folks, you know, get on me sometimes about like, you know, clean energy and green hydrogen and offshore wind. It's like if we can get rid of the fossil fuels and some of the dirtier, you know, inputs that are causing cancer, we'll have more jobs and we'll have healthier people. I mean, it's not a
How much pushback have you gotten as you've gone through that process? You don't have to give. I mean, if you want to give specifics, but you know.
I mean, I remember lobbyists when I first came here. It's like, you know, we know you're new. You're not going to last if you try this kind of stuff, right? Like, I mean, the threats,
right? Okay,
real, you know, that's not how we work here, right? Like, you know, you can't question some of the companies kind of stuff. And again, we didn't do. I mean, the thing is, we did a lot, and it still wasn't nearly enough, right? And I think that's the hard part. But yeah, I mean, I think the kind of the Delaware way pushback on the corporate side is real. And look, and there's ways. I mean, the nice thing now is that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was first starting, like there wasn't, you know, corporate sustainability plans. They weren't making like, climate commitments. This and that. We got to make sure those commitments are real. But like the conversations are different now because the technologies are better to clean things up.
Okay,
we just got to make the investments, right? And so it's just got to actually require that they, you know, actually do clean up their acts. So folks on Route 9 or folks in Claymont or folks in, you know, downtown Dover or different places aren't, you know, breathing fumes that they shouldn't be anymore.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about this specifically for an hour. And I'm actually surprised, like I'm trying to switch it up a little bit because I want to get to the education thing, obviously, but like this could very well be your focus point. You know what I mean? I know I checked your website out and all that, and I know that is high on the list. But so you see this giant issue that's really national, and specifically it's a big issue in Delaware. How does the education thing start to bite you, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like it's all kids, right? So like, you know, when you look at our stats around kids, and, you know, and I'm a girl dad, right? I got my 3 daughters that we were talking about. You know, we have some of the highest rates of infant mortality. We have some of the highest rates of asthma. We have some of the highest rates of early cardiac disease in some cases. You know, and it's all connected, right? And so, you know, I mean, I think for me, one of the reasons I got in is that a lot of the platitudes around like, oh, we need pre-K. Oh, we need like more equitable funding. I mean, all this different stuff. But the same folks that hadn't done anything about those things, right? And so, I mean, for me, it's just like, and I have a plaque in my office. It's the Frederick Douglass quote that says it's easier to build, strong children than repair broken men.
You know what's crazy is so don't go way off, but so I worked for years with the GAP program, and my the woman who keeps us all together, Miss Maria, that is her quote. So it's applicable to so many things.
And so my things, but like that, so that building strong children, right? There's a couple of parts to it, right?
Yeah.
Making sure kids are fed, making sure kids aren't breathing a bunch of pollution and drinking, unhealthy water, making sure they're getting education opportunities or like, early childhood through, through pre-K through school. But like, if we get that right, everything gets better. But we invest less, we focus less than almost any other state, and less money actually gets to the kids. And so that's how that's how it fits together for me. Because if we get that right, we are an infinitely stronger state.
Yeah. And so from your perspective, especially, I think it's always good to have people who are from here and who know all of the different things that are all the tiny details about what it is to sort of be in Delaware. But it's also great to have an outside perspective who's like, no, this is way different. And you don't have any concerns about your friends and all your ties in a different kind of way. So I guess my question is, why do you think that it is such a terrible situation here? It's just like, because I've been to a couple of, I was at a debate for the lieutenant governor, and there's a lot of conversation with people saying what they're going to do for education, and they understand that it's a significant problem and that we're way behind the other, the rest of the country. Like, what do you think the issue is? Like, why aren't we doing anything to really make a change?
Yeah, I mean, I think the line I always use in debates is that, we like to call ourselves the first state because it's the 18th century, we signed the Constitution first. But, when you're looking at, healthcare, housing, we're like 46, 47th. I mean, we're not near the top. Yeah. Like, I think it goes back to desegregation, right? I mean, I think, if you look at the 78 order, you look at the lines being drawn, in 80 and 82, all of a sudden, when a whole bunch of folks left the public school system, we didn't invest any more behind. We actually reduced funding in those years because the headcount went down. Yeah. Right. So all of a sudden, now in the early 80s, and this is during like the DuPont administration, getting the CASITA administration, funding drops. Yep. Right. And all of a sudden, then as funding drops, more kids flee. Yep. Then you get into the 90s and the choice, all of a sudden it was choice and charters, which is fine if you got a car and you can get somewhere else. But if you're not, then you're left behind. Same thing with charters. We're one of the only states that allowed assessment exams and geographic boundaries around charters. So once again, kids are left behind, which means there's also less and less political power fighting for those students that can't take advantage of those other opportunities. Yeah. Then you get into like the next decade when there wasn't a lot of money, and a lot of the solutions were more testing, more assessment, more kind of oversight of educators, have kind of trusting teachers. And so now you get to a point, and then layer on top of all that, throughout all this, 19 school districts, growing Department of Education, less money winding up in the classroom than almost any other state. It's a recipe for disaster. So then your dad's got to step in and be like, hold on, like this whole system's failed. But there's a bunch of well-intended policies, mostly made by folks who had no connection to the public school system, right? Because their kids are going to Tower Hill or whatever. It's not a criticism. Right?
No, but you're right. But it's like, to be clear, Tizzy Lockman basically, she was like, and this is off camera because I had her on the show years ago when I had my own podcast, and she was like, if you're gonna really invest in our kids' education, you have to, like, everyone has to invest in the public school system. And she was like, I understand Tower Hill, but she's right, and I get it. And I do have a certain sense of guilt because I understand that I'm very privileged to be able to send my kids there and that everyone can't. And it's also me understanding that the public school system is terrible. You know what I mean? So how do you want to fix it? Like, how do you think we change the situation?
Yeah, I mean, look, I do think it starts with money, right? I mean, like, and there's two issues, right? Because you got some folks that'll say like, oh, like it's just the bureaucracy, just need money spent better. It's not entirely true, right? Like absolutely, we have way too many school districts. I mean, if we were in Philly or we were in like Montgomery County or Prince George's County, there'd be one school district for 1 million people.
Yeah,
right? Or
I hear that a
2 million
lot.
People, right? Yeah. So like, there's absolutely redundancy, and it's complicated, right? Because those are people's jobs, those are people's families. Like, it's hard.
How do you condense that?
It's very Delaware, right?
Right.
But like, Christina's imploding right now with like the infighting, right?
Literally.
So I mean, like having conversations, right? So there's some savings to be held there. There's savings in DOE as well. We've added a lot of consultants, a lot of money that's not winding up in the classroom. But at the end of the day, I mean, the report that kind of said that we have between $550, $560 million or $1 billion shortfall in our classrooms is accurate. And so you had two issues simultaneously. You got a lack of money, then you also have a funding formula from the 1940s that's based on headcount. And so you got a high flying AP student, he gets the same amount of money as somebody that's got all kinds of trauma and has all kinds of additional needs. It doesn't make any sense. We're one of the only states that still does it that way. And so if you fix that piece, all of a sudden a whole bunch of things become possible. You know?
What are the other candidates talking about doing in terms of what their plan is to fix it? Is it wildly different from yours, or kind of the same old thing? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I think we tend to be more detailed in terms of like the mechanics of how to actually get it done.
But I think that's important
at a high level. Yeah. Because my thing is, like, what'll happen is it's Delaware, right? So like we'll have a commission that'll have a report. That'll then be debated for a bunch of years, and it'll be an election year. So folks, we can't do an election.
Right.
And so you're gonna be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, and nothing will have changed. And then your dad will have to sue again, and then we'll start the cycle again, right? So I think it's just, I mean, who's willing to say in the first state of the state, this is a top priority. We're going to get this done. And somebody could lose over it. Right. I mean, like, and one of my heroes is a guy named Russ Peterson, who was, governor in the 60s and in the early 70s. He was a one-term governor because he protected the coastal zone. He changed the cabinet form of government. He got the National Guard out of Wilmington. A lot of folks didn't like that stuff. And he got beat. And so, but his legacy, I can't name everyone that followed him, right? But I can remember, the stuff he did. And I think that's what we're going to need. I think the biggest thing is just like, where does it rank in the priorities and who's going to use the political capital? And, I think the thing that bothers me, probably the most is that we're seeing all kinds of transformative change in other states with Democratic governors that have very thin majorities. We got a supermajority in the Senate. We got almost a supermajority in the House. We got to act like it.
And I have another issue that I want to make sure that I get your opinion on, but that I think fundamentally definitely from my perspective and from a lot of other people, like if we start opening up the door to, police reform, it's like, that's where I really get frustrated with my state specifically, because it's a very blue state and we should be able to accomplish very blue things. And so many things seem to just never get done. And I don't really understand it. Like, I get people explain like, this person's here and they won't vote for that, this, that, and the other. But it's like, to your point, it should be able to get done, and I know we agree.
No, and I think my frustration was that, I mean, the number of things I've seen in Lake Hall over the years that everybody signed on to gets to committee in a lot of cases. And then all of a sudden, the vultures swarm and all of a sudden either it gets watered down or it gets killed. And again, it's not a criticism of any individual. It's like the system. And part of it's, having, Dover's hard to get to. So, folks from Wilmington, are they going to commit 4 hours out of, maybe have to take leave or whatever else to show up at a hearing at 2 p.m. when everybody's working, right? Really drive back. And so, I mean, it's inaccessible except for the special interests that have the best interest in making.
That's what their whole job is, to be there.
I mean, there was a debate this year on earned sick leave. So about 18 states, Democratic states across the country, ensure that, if you're working in food service or hospitality or whatever, you still have access to earned sick leave, because every white collar, every lawyer's got it, we don't here. We don't have it all. We have our proclamations about essential workers. We celebrate everybody, but we don't actually support folks. And so I went down to testify. I mean, it was probably, 80% of the room was filled by lobbyists for different special interests, because the folks that would benefit the most are working, right? Like, they're actually, and so there's just like this disconnect. So in the room, you hear, it feels like there's not a lot of support for it, but we know, right? I don't want somebody in food service showing up when they're sick because, they don't feel like they can take a day off because they're afraid they're going to get fired, right? I mean, I'd rather have them get better faster and then come back. But, these are the kind of conversations that, because we have incredible advocacy, but I think figuring out how to have more like people power behind it. So it's not just like the head of an organization going down to testify, but actually like
real numbers showing up to state their voice.
Yeah.
And you think that really makes a difference when it comes down to it, like, for sure.
I do.
Going back a little bit more just with the education. I feel like, and I think you're right, if I'm saying this correctly, that this is a situation where you can actually throw money at it. You just got to throw it the right way.
I think that's right. Yeah. Right. So let me run through this. So, look, the next government is going to face a ton of things that all come to a head at the same time.
Right.
So you got the funding formula kind of question. You got the AR report that said we need additional funding. You got the Reading Consortium, like the Rivers Plan, and finally get Christina the hell out of the city, and hopefully Colonial too. And then you also have kind of these massive questions around kind of the future of like testing and different pieces. So you look at all these things, and they're all coming at the same time. The recommendations of the Wilmington Learning Collaborative, which I have some concerns about. I think they've been attacking teachers in a way that's not helpful. But there's all these things that are coming together that could come in as part of a package, or it could be like a traffic jam.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so I think for me, like the money is the most important piece to start with, not for the sake of the problem, because we know where it should go. Right. And so, it starts to wrap around services, making sure that folks have mental health. They passed a couple of bills the last couple of years. It's really important. Making sure there's more teacher advocates, making sure there's more support for students in the classroom. Right.
Yeah.
I want to get free breakfast and school lunch done.
Absolutely.
Because kids that are fed learn better.
That's a fact.
Yes.
And
so the fact that this year, so we try to
get quality food,
good food, good healthy food, which supports agriculture if you do it right. Like have it come from here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Chicken every meal.
Especially in Delaware.
Right. Can we that in lima beans and soybeans over and over again. But there's an opportunity there, and that was a conversation that was maddening this year. So Ray Moore, representative from Middletown, had a great bill to basically provide free breakfast and school lunch. It had a price tag of $25 to $30 million. It wasn't cheap. Tim Walz in Minnesota, with a 1-vote majority, made it a priority, got it past the legislature. Josh Shapiro, with a Republican state Senate, made breakfast a priority, got it through the legislature. In Delaware, we decided we were going to basically have the reduced free lunch kids become, not have to pay at all, and we didn't cover anybody else. So we came up with a $250,000 solution instead of the big C's. If we had a solution, if you and I had a proposal tomorrow to say like, hey, if we did this one thing in curricula, it would improve scores by 3 or 4 points. It would improve. It would reduce absenteeism in schools. It would reduce the number of kids acting out. All these different things. Folks would pay ungodly amounts of money. Food does that, right? Like, schools where kids are fed, there's less fights, right? There's less there's less conflict. I mean, there's just it's good for performance and everything else. It's got to get done. So that's the kind of so I just think like the state, instead of kind of layering on more and more curricula, like should we focus on how do we make sure kids are ready to learn? Right? And so kind of wrapping that around.
Sure.
We also have, in addition to the funding formula kind of challenges, our staffing ratios don't make sense in a lot of places.
No, I think everyone's aware of that too.
And so I just think like, if you got a bunch of kids with IEPs or different, different needs, you need a co-teacher, you need additional paraprofessionals in the classroom. If you're teaching an AP English class, you might not need a bunch of extra bodies, right? So I just think like there's some things that we can do there. We've also taken away a lot of teacher autonomy. Like these folks went to school for this, right? Like let's trust them to help our students be able to read. There's kind of pedagogy around, kind of reading that, makes sense. And so again, I just think the state's been very heavy-handed on the curricular side and not actually supporting building strong kids, right? And I think if you focus on that piece, you can make a lot of progress really quickly.
How much do you think? I kind of have I'm thinking my way through it as you're talking, but like, how much do you think that? How much of an impact do you think that we get from paying teachers significantly more?
Yeah.
Do you think it would?
I do, and I think the reason is turnover, right? So like, we saw a lot of teachers like just during the pandemic turnover.
Absolutely.
So my first grader, when she was in kindergarten, and it was the way Apple does it. They have all the kindergartners in the same place, so and then they go into their feeder schools. The teacher that she had was great. 16-year pro, but she was only making like $47,000 a year.
It's absurd.
If she was in Cecil County or Kent County, just over the Maryland line, Maryland, Kent County, she'd be making $65,000, $70,000.
That's a difference.
And so she's moonlighting at Christiana Mall over the weekend, trying to make an extra $10,000, $15,000 because she's trying to put her kid in school.
That's completely unacceptable.
Right. And so she's exhausted from Monday. And she gave her all. I mean, she was an amazing teacher. But like, that's common all across the place. And so my thing is like, I don't want folks to do 3 and done. I don't want folks to do 5 and done, right? I mean, I want folks to make it a career because they can actually provide for their family. If Maryland's going to be starting at, 60, 61, 62,000, like we got to be there. In typical Delaware, like the legislature did an amazing thing a couple of years ago. They decided to, over 5 years to get to 60,000, which is great. I mean, it was the first real progress in a long time. Problem is by the time we get there, Maryland's going to be at 65, right? So
and inflation, right?
Inflation,
right? Okay.
And so it's like we're always kind of playing, catch up,
right?
And so I just think, I don't want anyone to leave the profession because they have to go in a different industry, or leave the profession, or leave the system because they have to go to another state. Like I want them here.
No, and like from my end, on one hand, I know like committed, real, dedicated teachers, like the really great ones, like you talk about, will do it for almost for free as long as they can pay their bills. That's because that's the kind of person they are. But at the same time, I just can't imagine that if they were, making $100,000, that they wouldn't be more locked in, and not just locked in because of the money, but like you financial stability really makes a difference in your day-to-day stress. You know what I'm saying? And having less stress in your life when you walk into a classroom gives you more energy to do what you love. You know what I'm saying? I know you know, but it's just like I feel like that's a big thing that could and should change. You know?
And it can, right? I mean, it's not
right,
I mean,
right.
And this is where, like, I mean, this is, I'm a better policy guy than I'm a politician. Like, we finally had the conversation about equitable assessment.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity to kind of think through how we fund the schools in a more equitable way.
Yeah.
You're going to need some kind of statewide pool that you're reallocating, because you can't just do it based on local property tax. There isn't enough value in some places, right? Just given housing stock and everything else. But if you had the equitable funding, teacher salaries can be part of that, because my commitment is I want to make sure everything winds up in the classroom. I'm tired of like the number of assistant secretaries of whatever, right? I mean, I want more folks that want to be in the classroom, want to stay in the classroom, have the support to spend 20 years in the classroom and not just a few.
Absolutely. Now, this is your this is the first time you've run for office, is that correct?
Yes.
So what, that's a jump. You know what I'm saying? Normally let's say, hey, first start with the school board, you know what I'm saying? Go here and then slowly build your way. Now, listen, we have some people who I think are terrible who just went straight from reality TV to president. So, it's not, an undoable jump. But what made you think, you know what? I've never done this before at all. Let's go straight for governor. You know what I mean?
It's a real question. Look, I mean, I think running a cabinet agency, so I've seen the inside, right? So I ran one of the biggest agencies, one of the most complicated agencies, and tried to do the best that we could. Now I run one of the biggest, nonprofits in the environmental space in the country. So I've had the kind of the management experience too.
Sure.
Like, it's probably bold, maybe it's a white guy thing, or I just assume
I got this. Right.
The Karenization, but like, I mean, I don't want to wait, right? And I just think, I don't know, like 5-10 years, one thing I do think happens is that I do think folks get like beaten down. I think a lot of folks come to the system with a lot of good energy.
Yep.
And then the desire to win re-election, got to have that next fundraiser. I think it does.
I have seen that too. Yep, absolutely.
And also I just think that, right now, if we don't make changes that are bolder, right? I just, and it's my colleagues that are on our friends, it's gonna be more of the same.
Yeah.
In different ways. But it's just like, I just think there's we need change, and I'd rather lose saying what I believe than myself, right?
And that's one of the reasons when your information was sent to me and I said this off camera, that I was immediately interested by what you're trying to do, because I certainly recognize that we have a tendency, especially in Delaware, to do the same thing over and over again in a slightly different way with a slightly different face, And I'm like, oh, he's outside of the box. And that, interests me, because that's how I function. Yeah. And I just think that fundamentally you can't shake anything up and really make a hard turn if you don't bring in a completely different kind of person. So that's why I was like, let's see what this guy's all about. You know what I mean?
I was at Reverend Bullock's church, and they had a forum there a few months ago. Yeah. And I quoted Martin Luther King's "White Moderates" line. And a whole bunch of folks in the audience were like did he just say that? Yeah. But there's a truth to it, right? This is kind of cool. And this is like, I love the collegiality of like the Delaware kindness and all that. It kills us in things like education. Yeah. Because folks aren't willing to say, like, kids are hungry, kids are struggling, families are struggling, and the situation just continues, right? And then when something like Tizzy comes along, who's doing amazing stuff, working again with your dad and with Namdi and others, even that though, right? It's like, oh wait, hang on, we can't touch Colonial. We can only talk about Christina, right? There's this you can see it at the committee level. So before you get to the school board, before you get to the state thing, there's just this narrowing, right? Of what the option, what that, I don't know, that Overton window, whatever you want to call it, right? Like that idea of and we negotiate against ourselves all the time. Yeah. There's this fear of this, almost irrational fear of somebody's gonna get mad. Yeah. Right? No, it's a real thing. And even from my end, as we are doing this interview, you know what I'm saying? I am 100% sure that people are watching this who know me and are like, damn, you gonna have him on, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, okay, you can be mad about it. I really don't ultimately care, but it's a thing that's in my brain, because I know everybody. And I'll say this, Matt Meyer had, okay, over the course of this weekend, there was a whole event. I don't know if you're aware of it, but Hanif Salam put on an event.
at the Route 9 library. And there was this whole thing about it that's still kind of bubbling, where he wasn't allowed to do it in the city and it got moved out to the county. And at the end of the day, Matt Meyer was the person who really helped him out. So I deeply appreciate that. You know what I'm saying? At the same time, what you present interests me. And it's like, for me, that is what politics should be. Like, we're going to hear everyone objectively, make your own personal decision, but like, you have to hear all perspectives. You know what I'm saying? And your perspective is very interesting to me. So I guess, how is the race going for you right now? You know, how do you feel?
I mean, it's interesting, right? So, I mean, I started at zero, right? Because there's no, it's outside of a handful of, environmentalists,
right,
folks that were going to work with me. We kind of moved to 8%, then to like 11%. Now we're like 16 or 17%.
That's a big jump.
So it's moving, right? It's moving in the right direction. I've been frustrated. It's just been so negative. Right. And you probably have the same thing with your kids. I mean, like, so my 7-year-old loves to get the mail. Yeah. Like, the number of negative flyers, just ripping people down or ripping people apart. Yeah. And this is where, like, my frustration is, like, education is like on the ballot this time. Yeah. We're talking about votes from 2013. We're talking about, just negative tax from out of state. And so I think what's been both heartening and frustrating for me is that when you're in the community, when you're talking to folks, it's all substance. Yeah. When you're talking to the political class, it's all just attacks and politics, right? Yeah. And so it's like this massive disconnect because folks are hungry for something different. Yeah. And the real cognitive dissonance is like, folks are so excited about, Vice President Harris and Walz and, kind of the generational changeover. And yet folks are like dreading, like turning on the TV because they're going to see like 6 negative attack ads. Yeah. And I think for me, I'm seeing a lot of folks come to us being like, just thanks for not engaging in that. And I don't know if that's enough to win. No, but like, it's real. Yeah, absolutely. So, just basic question. What is your take on police officer reform? Like, what is your opinion? Do you have any thoughts? Do you have a plan? Do you think it is even necessary? Like, what are your thoughts on that? So I mean, I have a lot of friends actually who were involved in the SB 149 fight a few years ago. This was the bill that and they got parts of it passed through SB 205, HB 205 and SB 205 and 206. Like, I mean, I think the distrust in communities is still real. Yeah. Right. I think the question I have is like, which pieces are Wilmington, which pieces are Newcastle County, which pieces are the troopers. I mean, like, and I was actually with the troopers the other day, interviewing different people. I'm trying to meet with everybody. Just to absolutely, you should. And I think trying to figure out places where like the focus in Wilmington, right, has to be real. And I think, and some of the issues with the county have to be real. And so I think where I want to start is, more transparency, having community review boards actually having community review boards, and then having them actually have teeth. And this is one area. I mean, the county did made a couple steps, right? There's still more to do. But, I just think like, until there's transparency, there's not going to be trust. And, and I just think, I think in some places we do a better job of having folks that are using stuff more kind of forced out. Other places they protect them. And so I just think for me, there's a lot of good energy here and a lot of smart solutions that are being adopted in other democratic states that we should have in Delaware, especially in some of the cities where, we're not seeing the level of reform we need to see. Yeah. And that's been probably my personal biggest frustration. Like, and I know that, and I don't mean this like in a conspiratory way, but like there is a lot of law enforcement that is retired law enforcement that is in government that for various reasons support not repealing Leobor or making significant amendments to it, and it's frustrating. You know what I'm saying? But this is back to like having a Democratic supermajority, but it doesn't matter if the folks who are in the right committees or in leadership can block something. Right? And I think the part that frustrates me is that they shut down the debate. Right. And I think it's like, have a vote. Don't do it behind. And like, why does that happen? Like, how does that? That's where it gets really nebulous and just really like, well, what just happened to me? Like, do you know? Like, why did the debate stop? Like, well, so I mean, in the case of SB 149, my understanding is that majority of the caucus is on it. You have a majority of the senators that are actually on the bill as co-sponsors. It gets to the Judiciary Committee, flying colors, and then it stops. And so different interests and some of the unions and others began raising questions. Yeah. And so then it ends up kind of falling apart. Yeah. And then these kind of smaller bills come in, it's wasting. But I think the frustrating part for a lot of advocates is that it didn't happen in a kind of transparent way. It passed through committee, right? So the next step should have been to the floor. And if there's amendments and something that's fine. Like that's the democratic process. But I just think what kills Delaware are things that aren't said and things that happen behind closed doors instead of let the process play out. Yep. Let people vote their conscience. Yep.
So another just big tent question, like, why should we vote for you? You know what I mean? Like, why? And I hate to be like, why should we, but yeah.
Yeah, look, I think for everybody watching out there, I think we need change, right? I mean, we've had a Democratic governor longer than any state in the country, except for Washington and Oregon State. The only two in the country. We have third the longest streak. We've had Democratic control of our legislature and our governor's office longer than anywhere in the country. Because California had Schwarzenegger, and there's been a couple of Republicans, right. Maryland and Massachusetts and other Democratic states. So the question is, like, if we've had that kind of control for this long, why aren't we doing better?
Right.
And like right now, our call ourselves the first state, right? But our schools are 46. Healthcare is the fourth most expensive in the country. We have something like the third or fourth highest rates of like eviction and foreclosure. We have the second highest rates of recidivism because we don't actually invest in kind of rehabilitation and helping folks have restorative justice and opportunities. And so, like, if you're happy with the way things are, you got two great choices.
Well done.
If you want change.
Well stated. Well stated.
And not that horrible quote about, right, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. Like, don't expect a different result if you elect the same folks over and over again. So, look, I mean, we're coming up. I mean, we're not splitting the vote. We're mostly pulling undecided. So I know some folks are worried about, splitting the vote in different ways. But, we get the government we vote for.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any big things that you want to say or talk about at all?
I think one thing. Let's talk about Wilmington just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, like, the number of votes that come out of the city to elect Democrats statewide is massive, right? And yet the infrastructure investments here are a fraction of what they are like in other parts of the state. Like, very little of the money that comes out of the city winds up back in the city. And you see this in other parts of the state. It's not just here. And so the question is, why is that? And so one of the things that I want to do is that, and this is going to sound nerdy, but President Biden had this initiative called Justice 40. The idea was that 40% of all the capital spending, all the construction spending, infrastructure spending, clean energy spending would be in communities that have been historically unseen, unheard, kind of fence line, frontline communities, focusing on environmental justice. We don't have anything like that here. And so you'll see, like, 52 be repaved, 12 times.
Yeah.
As like folks are driving through, massive potholes in different parts of the east side or the west side. And so one of the things I want to do is make sure they see real investment in the infrastructure side, because what that's going to do is it's going to help build wealth. Because all of a sudden you can get folks into houses, and we didn't talk about housing, but I mean, the housing stuff's a complete mess as well right now.
Yep.
We're increasing almost every year, and the number of properties that are being bought by investors, not by homeowners.
Yep.
And what that's doing is jacking up rent, it's jacking up, prices, so less and less folks can afford it. If we actually invest in neighborhoods, like, one of the best ways to build power, right, is to build wealth. And we can do it, but you need a state that actually understands how these dynamics work. And so, I just think there's an opportunity that, and again, it's hard, right? Because folks know people, folks do nice things. I mean, they have their moments.
Yeah.
But it's just going to be the same, unless you have transformative change, it's just going to be more of the same or more incremental, kind of change. So my pitch to everyone that's watching is, let's try something different. And I, hopefully gave you some reason to do that.
Yeah.
But, I just think there's so the activists and the activism in the state is so much better than the politics and the policies that we're getting out in the back end. Let's change it.
And I wonder, to your point, with that comment, the activism is present, but maybe there needs to be something changed there that connects it better.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that disconnect is. And maybe it's what you spoke about in terms of, like, more bodies showing up physically in Dover and at council meetings or whatever.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of people out here, doing the advocacy and being out there loud, but it doesn't always translate to a change. And I don't know what that gap is. You know what I mean?
My thought on that is that we got amazing folks that advocate for, like, their issue.
Yeah.
We don't have as much of, like, an intersectional, like, kind of progressive coalition, and we don't have the same level of solidarity you see in other states. Like, I want folks showing up for, like, workers' rights that also care about abortion rights, or to care about, right?
Yeah.
Like, care about, about protecting folks of based on sexual orientation or gender identity, right? Like, there's not, like, I want more of that table being connected, because what happens is, when the teachers are advocating, the PTO show up, and that's great. But then when you're talking about, like, gun violence, a very small fraction of them actually show up, right, to keep kids safe, right? And
Which
so, like,
is wild, but
right. But it's a logical connection, right? When folks are, some of the same folks that are advocating for affordable housing aren't as involved in some of the healthcare conversations, right? And so, like, they're connected, right? But because of the way we're organized, we don't bring that intersectionality to bear. If we did, and you had a governor that actually understood that stuff, the sky's the limit. I mean, you can move stuff really, really quickly.
Yeah. Okay. I can deeply appreciate that. That makes good sense. It really does. When is the primary?
So September 10th.
September 10th. So we're basically
we're
2
almost
weeks
there.
away.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
So.
And I can't wait. I like this is just a rant, but like I think our political process is so much longer than it has to be. I'm like, can we just please vote? Because people get nasty. And I know that you're doing your best to stay away from that, but I am like, it's really wild to watch people just slowly become, you know, nasty in certain ways. It's just like, wait a minute, like everyone's like just like angry almost. You know what I mean?
It's like on the presidential side, we need a 2-year primary. We need all this. Kind
No,
of stuff. We just moved the entire party structure around the vice president in 4 weeks.
Literally, there's no need for a year and a half of this.
Well,
like,
and folks that run for governor, right? And this was 8 years ago, basically, right? As soon as they were elected, they kind of started.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's like the old Dr. King quote about when folks show yourself, believe them. Like I think folks begin to show themselves in these campaigns. More desperate.
Yeah.
Like I would never. I just like with little kids. I don't want to be so desperate and thirsty for something that all of a sudden I'm like, betraying my values and like kind of having this negative side. But we're seeing some of that right now.
Oh, one more question. I don't know how your time is right now, but cool. And I really appreciate you doing this because, well, so I know that you took out a giant loan for your own campaign to kind of get things started for a million different reasons. And it's absurd that anyone would have to do that. And money in politics is a major problem. So like, how do you think we start to get money out of politics? Because, and I'm sure we all know people who would potentially be good, politicians. But it's like, you have to always the amount of money that what did they say that Kamala raised like $560 million? Yeah. Like there's no way that $560 million in my mind should have to go to a campaign. Like educate us on who the person is, it's just, I know it's absurd,
no, exactly.
But like, how do we start to get these obscene amounts of money out of politics and put it somewhere where it would actually be beneficial? But I
mean, this race is probably like $7 or $8 million.
It's absurd.
It's crazy.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, especially because everybody knows everybody. Well, like I know who Matt is. Like I know. Well, like,
that's exactly right. But the problem too is that like when somebody's writing $100,000 check, they expect something. Right. And so like, I mean, I put out a reform package. It's really nerdy, but like we have no control of our campaign finance system at this point. None. I mean, so we have like a $1,200 limit, but like if someone wants to write $100,000, $500,000, $1 million check to like a PAC, there's no limits. There's no disclosure for the most part. If you give through an LLC, there's no paper trail at all.
Wow.
And so 21 states across the country have banned corporate and LLC contributions. When there was an investigation by Justice Veazey in 2013, basically looked at a whole bunch of problems and things. His number one recommendation was get rid of the corporate money in our elections. If you do that, a whole bunch of things change. Yeah. If you put limits on the amount of folks can give to PACs, which have been upheld, that's not unconstitutional. You can limit that amount. All of a sudden, then all these ads you're seeing, all those flyers you're getting in the mail, almost every single one of those is a PAC ad. They're not actually from They're not actually from the campaigns.
Gotcha.
And then and because campaigns don't want to be tagged with the negative stuff, so they have somebody else do it for them.
Right.
So that's the second one. Third is that to your point, 26 different municipalities and states have some form of public financing. Okay. Where if you give like New York City is a good example. So if you give $100 in New York City, they'll actually provide additional money to get that, make it like maybe like $750 contribution. So like regular folks can participate and give $25, but it's like 5-to-1 match or whatever the ratio is. And all of a sudden that doesn't force you to get $1,200 checks from every single special interest, every single business entity. And so it changes the dynamics. They're in Maryland they have some of these programs as well. And so like there's a whole bunch of things that would just get the money out because I've been inspired. Brandon's been, I got to give him a call. Actually, he called me yesterday. But he's been running a great race here. We're in the third, right? And gotta be close. Sorry. But he's running an insurgent campaign against some folks that are pretty well financed. But he's lived it, right? When he's talking about affordable housing, it's not some academic concept, right? And so I mean, I want to make sure I gotta send him some stuff. I got to make sure that he's that folks like him have the ability to run because I think there's all kinds of folks, county council, city council, all kinds of places that would love to be part of it. But if you didn't buy in 20 years ago when it was cheaper, like getting in now is really hard. And one of the things that saddens me is that we've never really seen massive negative attacks in the state. And setting aside the governor's race, even some of the down ticket stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the special interests that are like carpet bombing some candidates right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like, promote your person. That's fine. But like, why do you have to rip everybody down? Because it just turns people off from the entire system and makes them not want to vote.
Yeah, and like, okay, listen, if we find out that so-and-so candidate like stabs puppies, fine. Like, let's let everyone know that this person is a puppy stabber.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But like, you know what I mean? Okay, he's a horrible person and we should all know that. But like, it goes way too far, because at the end of the day, from my end, I mean, I do have a fundamental distrust of politicians, that's for sure. But like, I think that fundamentally, most of these people aren't like horrible people. And it's gotten too ugly. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and look, and I think there's absolutely places where, you know, if someone does something, you know, kind of improper, that it should be called out, it should be investigated, all those kind of things.
Right.
I just worry like when it becomes not about the truth, but about the weaponization of it.
Mhm,
Right. I
mhm.
think that's the part that's hard. But you know, I mean, like, I mean, my 6-year-old the other day was like actually asking, like, you know, should this person like be in jail based on a piece of mailing? And it's just like, no, like they're good people. They're trying, right? They're you know, like, they did something maybe that wasn't perfect, but like, you know, but I don't want, you know, our kids, right, to be in a position where like they distrust. I mean, there's plenty of reason to distrust government on the substance, right? But like, it just erodes the entire system.
Yeah, it makes people not want to participate, and we need the opposite: people participating. You know what I mean?
Because they win if we don't participate.
Right.
Self-fulfilling, right?
Exactly. Cool. Anything else you want to put out there?
No, I appreciate the time, Jay.
Cool. Well, this is gubernatorial candidate Collin O'Mara. I think he's someone that you should definitely check out. Like I've given you what we talked about. Research all of your candidates, you know, do your own research, do your own thinking. But I'm really glad that you reached out and we had this conversation. And end of the day, everybody, vote, participate, because it really matters.